their word on some of these things couldn't be trusted. As Prime Minister Carney said, they like to write their agreements in pencil. So I think it was smart to walk away, as difficult as that was, and as difficult as it is for Canadians. You know, I grew up with my father working for General Motors in a household that had been built on the Auto Pact of the 1960s, where Canada and the U.S. Traded together, did mutual supply chains. So this is a real shock for our economy, but it is also a threat to our sovereignty. So it was the right decision to walk away.
Canadian leader. Let's now talk to Erin O'Toole, who's a former leader of the Conservative Party in Canada and also is a member of Canada's Advisory Committee on Canada-US Economic Relations. Erin, welcome to the programme.
Good to join you.
Thank you for joining us. Just share your thoughts first, if you would, on the way these talks were proceeding and then they broke down. Canada's side is that the American side just changed the terms of talks at the very last moment.
Well, there was a very different tone of dialogue when the negotiations went from verbal discussions and trying to resolve key issues into a written text and firming up the details. When the details kept changing and the Americans were already walking away from the agreement we struck in the first Trump administration, the agreement we call CUSMA, they call USMCA, we realized it couldn't, their word on some of these things couldn't be trusted. As Prime Minister Carney said, they like to write their agreements in pencil. So I think it was smart to walk away, as difficult as that was, and as difficult as it is for Canadians. You know, I grew up with my father working for General Motors in a household that had been built on the Auto Pact of the 1960s, where Canada and the U.S. Traded together, did mutual supply chains. So this is a real shock for our economy, but it is also a threat to our sovereignty. So it was the right decision to walk away.
Right. And when you say it was a shock, when you say you were surprised, you say in the same breath that America essentially can no longer be trusted, that the word of the leadership of the United States is no longer valuable, can't be relied on. That's a very strong statement.
It's something I never thought I would say in my lifetime. As someone that served in the military here in Canada, we always trained and served alongside the Americans within NATO and within NORAD. I worked for a large American company in Canada as their lawyer before I got into politics. So we've been so integrated on a defense and security basis, we've taken the relationship a bit for granted. But when President Trump in his first term wanted to renegotiate what was called the NAFTA agreement, it became this new agreement, USMCA or CUSMA. They're not even respecting that. So you judge future behavior by past behavior. And that's why we're in a position where we can't just take verbal negotiations and the sort of direction, a positive direction they were headed under the USTR, Mr. Greer. We had to make sure that we could count on any agreement. And the Prime Minister did not have that confidence, nor did his council that I participate in, or his cabinet, or the premiers. So I think Canadians are united in wanting a fair deal and wanting our sovereignty respected.
So if you then tell us that America's good faith can no longer be relied on, where do you point the finger of blame? Erin, are you talking about the president himself, Donald Trump? Are you talking about the trade envoy, Jameson Greer? Are you talking about the commerce secretary? Or all of the above? I mean, how do you see it?
I would like to distinguish Trade Representative Greer. I do think he's conducted himself professionally and with good faith. He impressed a lot of Canadians when he even responded to our French-Canadian media with his quite good French. And so there's been a rapport established between our negotiators and Mr. Greer and his team. I do think in the final stretch, when the White House and other members of cabinet, obviously the 232 tariffs, these security tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos, those are the domain of Secretary Lutnick. So when other people became involved, the ground started shifting a little bit. So I do think the president is ultimately responsible. He has kind of an antiquated view of mercantile trade and the use of tariffs. The irony is these new tariffs he's applied, the Hawley-Smoot tariffs from almost a century ago, deepened the Great Depression because there was this tit-for-tat response. So we're not even listening to how history is rhyming here. The U.S. economy is not in a good place. Their bond market is in a state of chaos. U.S. auto assembly companies like General Motors and others have lost billions of dollars in the last year. So who's winning from this tariff war? It doesn't seem to be the United States.
Well, there's also a strange edge to this confrontation, isn't there? I see that hockey sticks are on the Canadian hockey sticks are on the list of things to suffer tariffs. And I know that hockey is Canada's national sport, but what's going on there? Is this about just adding insult to injury?
I think the 338 tariffs, these new tariffs the president threatened a month ago that now came in over the weekend, they were picking a number of symbolic measures, and they were trying to make sure that certain provinces were targeted more than others. What's interesting, John, is the Americans are excluding all the things they benefit from with Canada. So they're excluding energy, oil and gas, uranium for nuclear power. They're excluding potash, which of course helps all their farmers become productive and efficient. So the Americans want the very best of the trade relationship. In fact, the trade deficit with Canada is only the result of the fact that we export oil to the U.S. refineries as part of their energy dominance strategy. So they want the good of Canada without respecting our ability to be part of the North American auto industry, for example. So whether some of those sectors are targeted in the response, I don't know. But I really do think that the Prime Minister, Carney, and his team now are trying to come up with a series of packages that will protect workers and industries. The U.S. is trying to hollow out parts of our economy, and we have to hold the line or hold fast, as you might say in the Navy, to make sure we can get through this time.
Well, how hostile can this become when we hear Prime Minister Carney saying that Canada will match the American action dollar for dollar? That will lead to further escalation. You wonder how far this can go.
Well, the president already posted this morning, threats about new tariffs in January. There's going to be a lot of challenges the U.S. economy and the U.S. political structure will face before January. There's midterm elections where the Republicans right now are not doing well in the polls. So this could escalate things. I do think dollar for dollar doesn't just mean us targeting a series of U.S. exports and tariffing those. I do think that dollar could be dollar of subsidization or support for some of our sectors. So we have to recognize what they're targeting with these new 338 tariffs, with their 232 tariffs. We know these numbers, John, because the president actually doesn't really have authority on tariff application and trade. Congress has to give him authority, and they're picking obscure old acts of Congress to come up with a presidential authority to do this. So the whole exercise is really farcical for a conservative like me that likes to see freer trade and competition. The U.S. is putting their own auto industry into upheaval. Yeah. Their military supplies are low because of the war in Iran. And why would they be charging more for Canadian aluminum and Canadian steel to help rebuild their military? So it's nonsensical in my view, but it is what it is. And Canadians are now going to unite together and come up with a response to protect the families impacted.
Okay, now Canada has agreements with America beyond the sphere of trade. In defence, for example, is it possible that those defence cooperation agreements could be affected by all this?
We sincerely hope not, and I do think the negotiating team in the early talks have indicated that some of these security alliances like North American NORAD to safeguard the Arctic interests of Canada and the U.S., those will remain the same. Like the UK, Canada has many military officers on exchange with the Americans now and have had that for generations. That will continue. So we don't anticipate it going into that sphere. I do think the trade war we're in can be rough and tumble, but there's still such great person-to-person ties. There's still a lot of mutual collaboration done between Canada and the U.S. So let's hope it doesn't drift into other aspects of the relationship.
Erin O'Toole, the former leader of the Conservative Party in Canada. Thank you. More coming up here on Drive on Times Radio.